This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company and Purdy Insurance. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Half hour being brought to you by Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Auto, home, life, business, boat, motorcycle, RV. We have a wide range of insurance needs. They make sure that A, you're completely covered. B, they do everything they can to find ways to save you money on these policies. They update them. You are not just a number. Customer service means everything to them. At Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Very pleased to be joined by the outstanding Jon Sauber, Center Daily Times. John, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me on, Steve. Always appreciate it.
All right. So what is supposed to be a dead time in the sports year in college, outside of, obviously, softball, baseball, track and field championships, has been active because of the debate over 24 versus 16. Now, nothing is supposed to be decided until December 1st. But how have you viewed this debate between 24 and 16 for the college football playoff?
Yeah, I think this is fascinating, right? Because it's quickly turned into everybody against the SEC, which is it's just fun to watch for me personally. But I have generally been a very pro expand the playoff person for a while. I always say that the percentage of teams that make the postseason in college football is so much lower than every other sport that I think an expansion to 24, which is still less than 20% of FBS teams make the playoff. I think that's perfectly reasonable. I'm not as big of a believer that it devalues the regular season either, just because I think it just creates more meaningful games a little bit lower down the rankings, I guess, than we would anticipate, while still having a bunch of those high-end matchups that we all want to see that will always have value. But yeah, I think it's been very fun to watch play out because everyone is seemingly pretty hardened in their stance right now, and it seems like the only solution is either stay at 12 or go to 24. And right now, I would have to guess that it eventually gets to 24. Is that like you said, by this December they make the change for the coming years? That's tough to know. It kind of depends on how willing Greg Sankey and the SEC is to change their mind.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to, because across the board, look, coaches I understand completely, because getting to the playoff means everything. And I also want to talk briefly about the championship games, because under 24, John, they would be eliminated. And you and I both know, when you covered Penn State, Oregon in the Big Ten title game a year and a half ago, both of us knew Penn State and Oregon were both in the playoff. It was just a question who got the bye. Same thing this year with Indiana played Ohio State. Everybody knew they were both in. Yet Fernando Mendoza got absolutely tagged on the second play of the game by Caden Curry. Well, what if that put him out for the playoff in a game where you knew the stakes were just over a trophy and not over winning the national championship? To me, that brought some of that into focus. What did that do for you?
Yeah, I think that is an excellent point, right? And, the conference title games, as the playoff gets bigger, they just aren't as much of a necessity, right? They became a necessity when the playoff existed as a way for, a conference like the Big Ten to kind of stack up with schools that already had conference title games and give their schools a chance to show off and prove that they were able to make it. But once it expanded to 12, honestly, it stopped having value to me. And I would have, there are a lot of proposals out there what conferences can do. Bill Connolly, I think, has the proposal to make it sort of a flex week and give you the 1 versus 2, 3, whatever it is, in conference in sort of conference championship weekend rather than just being about the conference championship. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's abundantly clear that those games aren't as valuable as they used to be, and they're no longer a necessity. And frankly, like it's not like it's something that's steeped in tradition, right? Like I said, the Big Ten has had a conference title game since 2011. This is not something that's been going on for decades that we're trying to preserve here. It's a different avenue that is no longer necessary, and I think one that can probably go away and not really devalue what we see that weekend, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a conference title weekend, whether that's the opening round or whether it's some sort of flex week in conferences. I think there's a way to create value even more than we have right now, where it's, most of these major conferences, the games don't really matter. Maybe 1 out of 4 every year does.
I also think that in November you're going to have more games where people are fighting to either get in this thing or get a bye, which is a big part of that. That's what I think. That's where college football kicks it into another gear once you get to November 1. And I think you have to view the stakes differently and the importance of the games differently because of it. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point, right? Like you're going to have, it goes back to what I said sort of in the open about maybe it's not like 1 versus 3 or something like that, but 12 versus 14 or 5 versus 6, and those sort of games kind of matter. And it's not, I don't think it's devaluing the regular season. It's reallocating that value, right? It's putting it in a different place and creating, more opportunities for more programs. And I've been very pro playoff expansion for a while. I think, maybe the motives aren't necessarily great for why this is happening, right? Like it's strictly a money thing, and I think that the more that becomes the reasoning, the less valuable it is. But I think there's real merit to expanding the playoff without taking account for that. And I think most of the things that people fear that will happen are probably not going to end up being the case when it's all said and done.
Yeah, but I'll say this about the money part. The NCAA is taking the basketball tournament going to 76, and I'll get your thoughts on that in a moment. The thought of going to 24 in football, okay, and college basketball is going to add a game this year and get to 32. And there will be some that say, I'm not saying you, John, there's some that would say it's a money grab. Yet Penn State's got 29 other sports that are losing money. I mean, all the other 29 sports are losing money despite perception, and they're not getting less expensive. And I think there's only certain ways they can get more money, and this happens to be a couple of ways of doing it. From a financial point of view, that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it, and I think that's I think you put it well, right? It's a necessity right now. I think we all know that there are major reforms coming to college athletics, and that kind of revenue can be really helpful in the short term. But I do think it's on some level, I guess, a little bit of a Band-Aid for the long-term issues of, collective bargaining, salary cap. But I do think it has value right now, like you said, absolutely.
Okay, so how do you view 76? I mean, because you are a big college basketball guy. How do you view 76 versus 68?
Nobody seems to like this opinion either. I actually would be fine with 96 too. It goes back to the representation of, the number of teams that make the postseason. Really, professional leagues, it's way closer to 50%, and college basketball is still around like 20%. But with 76, it's basically just taking the 4 bubble teams that we highlight every year that don't make it and letting them play it out to get in, right? The only issue I really have is forcing more 16 seeds or conference champions to play on that opening weekend, or that opening day, I should say, that Tuesday and Wednesday. I wish they would just be all bubble teams, quite frankly, and we let those conference championships make it. But, I don't really have issue with the expansion as much as I do with sort of how they're doing it, right? I think the number's right. I think the execution's a little off.
Yeah, I know the one area for the NCAA, because when you have a long career, you end up knowing people. I'll phrase it that way. The one issue that they have above all in the current climate is making sure they get charters for all these teams. Right, and they're struggling to find charters now for what they have. Now they're going to have to do it for more at a different site, and logistically, everything else falls into place except for the charter part. I mean, that's just as a little aside for everybody.
I do think I wish there was a way to to regionalize that first four in a way, right? Like and I know, and I'm talking like last minute, like 2 days before, right? Make it so these teams from areas can meet at a midpoint to sort of simplify some of those things. But yeah, I think logistically that will never happen as much as I may want it to.
Well, I think they've already said that the other site is going to be either in the Central, Mountain, or Pacific time zone. My suggestion, because I think Dayton's in no matter what. Yep. They do a great job of embracing the tournament, and they show up no matter who's playing. I think the other place that would fall into that category to me is Omaha. Omaha's the kind of place they seem to like people like, okay, let's go. It's a game. Let's go. Doesn't matter who's playing. We're going.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree, right? Like, I think those sorts of areas and we know they can host college athletics, right? With and there's an appetite for it. We see it with the College World Series in Omaha. Like, I think absolutely, like, this is the kind of thing where you should be targeting these areas that just have people who want to watch sporting events, right? Maybe don't get professionals or high-level college athletes year-round. I think Omaha's a great idea.
All right, so they go to 32 games, 76 in college basketball tournament. By the way, John's idea of 96, I don't think a lot of people realize that when they went from 65 to 68, the original proposal was 96. Like, that's how far back that goes, right? And then so John's not speaking out of turn. It has been something that, that was actually openly discussed before. When you look at the off season for Penn State football, right? So all the spring practices are over. Did you get a sense in talking to them that when you're blending a team, that they seem to accomplish that goal in the spring of blending all the parts together, whether it's a Penn State group, an Iowa State group, a UCLA group, or whatever?
Yeah, I think that was honestly one of my biggest takeaways from post-blue-white practice, right, where I can't remember who said it, but there was a player who mentioned that they're kind of just past that, right, because they've been asked about it a lot this spring, they were asked about it a lot in the winter, they were asked about it post that practice, and they essentially said, it's not about, like, the Iowa State faction or the Penn State faction, it's just, now it's Penn State, right, like, they're not as concerned about that part of it anymore, and they all said that there were some, struggles isn't the right word, but they sort of had to adjust to each other. But it seems like that they've accomplished that how they want to, and they no longer sort of view themselves as being from wherever they came from. They're now just here as part of the 2026 team.
5 years to play, 5 years total, nothing beyond that, with a couple of exceptions. How do you feel about that potential rule coming into play?
I think it is a great idea. I will be curious to see how it's executed, whether you, bring it in and it starts, year one, that's when it starts, and everyone's grandfathered in that was already there, because, as we know, Penn State men's basketball has several players that probably wouldn't have eligibility at this point if they were, starting that clock at 18 or 19 or what have you. So I'll be curious to see how it's implemented. There's obviously stuff with men's basketball, too, and potential eligibility of guys who have played in pro leagues that I'm curious to see how it plays out. But as always with the NCAA, it's going to be a little messier than you want it to be.
Well, see, I think you can't do it like starting now. It has to be implemented starting next year, because I'll take it from a college basketball. It doesn't affect college football much, all right, because, there are only so many Australian punters out there. All right. But to me, it affects college basketball. You can't look at somebody. I think the vote is in June. You can't look at them in June after you've already established your roster and tell you, I'm sorry, there are 3 guys in your roster that are ineligible now because we passed this rule. I think you've got to start it next year. Realistically, you can't do it now because everybody has a roster.
And if you don't, I think you have to open the portal again, right? And that's like a nightmare scenario for every program. So I'm with you. I think there's no way they can do it now. That being said, I wouldn't necessarily put it past them to try. I just don't see that logistically being realistic or fair to athletes, teams, coaches, really anyone involved.
John, how do you feel about the legislation put forward by Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Maria Cantwell about reform of college athletics from the congressional level?
I don't dislike it as much as I originally sort of expected to, knowing some of the goals that they're trying to achieve with it. I want college football to get back to being sort of regionalized again. I like some of that stuff. I like the idea of having sort of a hard salary cap, right, or at least some sort of guidance in that financial regard. But as we know, that's going to change so much by the end that it's tough to say what will stick. But I do think there are some good, like, maybe not the specifics, but the broader ideas of getting back to why people like college football and then creating an environment that works for everyone is generally good.
Look, I think it's something where it looks to me like the NCAA got about 90% of what they hoped for out of this. So if I were them, I wouldn't quibble over the 10%.
Yes, yeah, but you know how the NCAA is. They might be quibbling over it anyways.
Like, what are we doing here? And it's like, you got 90% of what you asked for. The key part to me is the part of whether they're employees or not.
Yes.
Because you brought up something earlier about collective bargaining. Well, collective bargaining can happen if they're employees. And the Republicans would like to see them not be employees. The Democrats would like to see them unionized. I think that's where they're going to have a little bit of a rub and a discussion as to whether this goes through or not, because they need 60 votes in the Senate.
Yeah, and I honestly think one of the things about that, too, is I believe it was in there that it can't be used as an argument for or against, and I don't necessarily hate that, right, no matter where you fall on it. Like, allowing this to just not be a part of that discussion and being an entirely separate thing, I don't hate that idea. We'll see if that actually plays out, though.
So at this time of the year, what do you look to write about? And, you know, at this point, because there's actually been exponentially more news over the past month than you normally have in a college cycle. But between now and Big Ten Media Days, what ideas are you having?
Yeah, so I'll be doing a lot of interviews with coaches and players here over the next, few weeks, month or so, and just trying to gather as much information as these guys as I can about heading into the season, but also personally, right, the sort of personality profiles. Last year I did the story on James Franklin, his childhood. I'll be looking to do those sorts of things, and it's trying to get to know players, get to know coaches, get to know people in the building, and tell those stories that maybe people aren't quite as aware of yet, and working through those. And in the meantime, as you know, I will also be on the golf course.
And he hits the ball really well, by the way, just so you know.
I appreciate that.
He's a good player. Is there a player on this team that has been with the program that you're intrigued by to write more about? And is there a player on the team that has just entered the program in the past 6 months that you're intrigued to write about?
I think for the latter, it's Siali Taupaki, defensive tackle. He's an older guy. I think he's going into his 6th or 7th year of college athletics.
Yeah.
But he's got a very interesting story, very interesting background. Very close with his family, even though they aren't sort of playing football wasn't a big thing for him, growing up or anything like that. But very interested to talk to him and write about him. And then someone who's been with the program, I think Tony Rojas is the obvious one. Right? He had a very boisterous offseason, I'll say. Like his voice was out there, and he made it known how he felt about things, but ultimately decided to come back to Penn State. I think digging into why that's the case, what sort of his thought process was, and even some of the, we'll call it the lingering Miami stuff that we all know was out there in December, right? Like kind of diving into what that process is like for a guy.
Yeah, and that's an interesting process to dive into. I'll say this: if you're going to talk to Taupaki, that means you also have to talk to Malloy. And
yes. Yeah.
And with all due respect, he's a fun dude.
Oh yes, he is. He is one of. I mean, that's been the case with a lot of these coaches too. It's been very welcome, I know, from myself and the rest of the beat. But yeah, Malloy he brings an energy to everything, right? Like it's hard not to enjoy talking to him.
I say this when I'm out there watching, and I think Oh, these guys are young. I think I'll transition to that part of my career.
For me, all the coaches around my age. It's I'm 31. All these guys are 34, 35. It's great.
Imagine how I feel. I'm the one with all. Okay. The coaches out there being younger, gray hair is being created for them based on an everyday basis on the practice field. I'm already there.
Hey, listen, even I'm starting to get some of those grays in now, so I feel that on a very small level. I feel it.
He still hits the golf ball a mile, everybody. All right, so, Jon, always a pleasure. I really appreciate your time and your insight.
Thanks for having me on, Steve. Always appreciate it.
The outstanding Jon Sauber, Center Daily Times, does great work this half hour, brought to you by our good friends at Purdy Insurance. Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. We have multiple insurance needs. They find ways to make sure you're fully covered. They find ways to save you money. Customer service means everything to them at Purdy Insurance. Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. On News Radio 1070 WKOK.